Holy. There's this. I should start. I need to do one of those Dune prayer services. Everything possible could go wrong is going wrong, which is good because this is exactly why I'm doing this right now because of next week. Hopefully, there's a lot of echoing going on right now. I really hope so. So, so the subject today is color theory, not troubleshooting. Let's check this out, bros. It's the new phrases these days. Just this and this bald guy. We'll get to that. I don't need to. We'll get through with what we can get through. So speaking of difficulties, sorry, no more echoes. Echo. Here, I'll just type in echo. There you go. Echo. All right. I need one of my buddies to help me. That's a real fact. All right. So one of the main difficulties of choosing, I can't even think straight right now because my mind is elsewhere. But one of the difficulties of technology, but one of the difficulties of color theory is choosing the right color. And it can be, well, it can be obviously really hard to do and narrow down what that right color is and all that sort of stuff for your artwork. And so, like I said, anywhere from like, and every artist it certainly goes through this sort of struggle of like what color do you choose? How do you we all go through the struggle, right? And and then on top of it, throwing life spills over, and then every sort of possibility, regardless, color is a struggle, right? And so let's do this. So what I want to do today is go back to the basics, and what this video and for goodness sakes, I'm going to edit it down to the core portion here. But this video is going to go over the tips of creating a more accurate color palette and then mixing and go through several different styles of mixing. And this also relates to, even though I'm showing you on Photoshop, this definitely relates back to how to do it on um, in traditional media. So color it is just like any other aspect of art, illustration, design, and no matter what that color style is, in in actuality, it's all about language, right? And so one of the theories, and actually one of the foundation of much of what we have with color theory today is from Munsell. And Munsell's theories on color theory came out in the 19th century. And much of my educational experience comes out of that color theory as well and philosophy. And this can be broken down into three categories. You have value, which is our first section right here. Then we have hue, which is our color. And then we have our chroma. And then with value is a extension of lightness to darkness. And then hue is that portion of the color wheel in around a rainbow, obviously such as green, blue, red, yellow, etc. And then chroma is the intensity of that color range, ranging from all the way the most intense, which is generally somewhere around here, all the way to neutral gray. So you have these three categories. What's interesting, actually I want to take us to a different viewpoint here. I'm going to change this up just a little bit. What's interesting is that if we think about color theory and we think about color, is that we tend to think about it as a flat in flat terms because all of our experiences either through art or digital what's in front of us it's always in a basic form of it's flat. But what's interesting is that how we view the world is not necessarily we have this 3D drawn perspective drawing right here. And with perspective or even color theory, it's either sort of this mathematical equation that we can come up with or science-based equation that we can come up with to be able to articulate what we're seeing and experiencing. But the problem is that I'm able to, for example, peripheral, I can see out here to my peripheral. But then it's not a flat space, but it's a experienced in a three-dimensional bridging into the fourth and into the fifth dimensional and these types of things. Amazing subjects. But then on top of it, it's what we have on a two-dimensional surface is, well, it's this combination of science and discovery. And the best way to think about color is not in this three-dimensional, or excuse me, in this flat, isolated form, but rather in a three-dimensional, or actually color is a three-dimensional object that we can actually experience, and then what changes can be made from that. If we think about color as an object in a three-dimensional space, we start to realize that the qualities of value, hue, and chroma take on an entirely different, well, dimension within that space. And so the best way, and certainly through Munsell's color system, we consider value as this pillar. So if I would have a straight line, let's see here. So if I had a point on my three-dimensional square right here, going all the way down right here, we have this pillar of space that's occupying. So value would occupy this center portion right here, ranging from light to dark all the way at the bottom, right? Now color or hue would be occupying the space around that three-dimensional object. And so all your hues would occupy this around that. Now chroma would be occupying anything from the inside of this pillar to the outside of this pillar, to the outside and branching out in this three-dimensional space, which is pretty cool to think about in these sort of circular being the value, and then the pillar, of course, the pillar being the value, and then the circular form of the color wheel, and then that dimensional, that intensity of that color branching out from there in a three-dimensional space. So when we look at color, we tend to think about it back to our bald-headed guy, but back to our three-dimensional space right here, or back to our two-dimensional space. And as it means to understand, or the complexities of the world we are in, seen through Munsell's gives us a little bit of a glimpse of a mathematical process that we can begin to understand the two-dimensional into a three-dimensional space, and certainly throughout our illustration, design, and art. We're going to go to that next layer. So within that next layer, one of the cool things is that we have three sections. So we not only have the value, hue, and chrome, but we also have tints, shades, and then we have tones, which is the center section. So the tints would be those branching from our most intense color, chroma, all the way branching to a more neutral, or in this case, white. And then vice versa for our shades would be those degrees or shades all the way to dark or black, with dealing with the shades. And then with the tones, branching in, and all the way to our neutrals. Now, one of the things about tint or tones rather is that the colors that as we mix further, you can see in this section right here becomes fairly muted or muddy. And one way to keep your colors from feeling muddy or washed out is that by forcing too much of the tone is to, well, simplify it down into really three colors. And if you're working with three colors, not necessarily not white or black, but three colors, it'll gives us a little bit more of a possibility and a potential, leaning away from that, again, sort of the muddy feel that we might get from time to time. If the colors don't work out between sometimes three different choices that we make, that's really okay. But in reality, like in this situation here today with technology, it's an opportunity to learn from that experience or experiment and take that knowledge into your next, well, set of mixtures. Which brings us into our next category that I want to talk about. We never really think about it in terms of, well, white is actually a color or black is actually a color. In reality, with white, it's just like any other color. White has a hue, it's a hue, it has a value, and it has a chromal connection or chromal value to it. Now, one of the downsides of white is that it is lacking its chromatic color that is available. And if you try to create the idea of brightness, the quality of white can actually get in the way of achieving that goal, which is what we have right here. And in actuality, bring up, there we go. In actuality, as we move from our most intense version right here, and by mixing in white, things get, well, we get a bit muddy in this section right through here. And we lose that intensity of the color. So how do we work through this? So to get around this, my thing is that one thing that we can do is we can have in here, we have our two examples, is that instead of mixing with straight white, we actually mix with a lighter version, still maintaining that value of that yellow. And along with that, as we mix further and further, we get this idea of brightness out of this, and it doesn't feel as washed out as what we have here, because what we have here, it almost feels like we're adding in, it feels a little bit more gray in its value. And so by mixing in a lighter version of yellow, we can actually get across or accomplish what we want to see here. And again, we maintain that intensity and most importantly, brightness, warmth, these types of values. In contrast, the white gives us a feeling of dull, drabbed, and, well, but it certainly lacks that intensity. In other words, it lacks that energy that we have actually in our other version, our second version here, this being the first and our second right over here. And the same principle applies with black. And just like when we mix things with black, we tend to think about it in terms of darkness. But in truth, it's one of the darkest colors that we actually have access to. If we think about it, the same process applies to black as it did with white. And, well, let me say it this way, with black is that it has the qualities of a low value. In actuality, it's much closer to a blue or a purple with low chronal qualities. To see this in action, we have examples here. Again, applying our cadmium yellow on both ends over here, and in this case, I did more of a brown than necessarily a black, but the same rules apply where if I mix with another color, we get more of that idea of darkness while at the same time maintaining that intensity. Where if we mix with a darker chronal value, things get a bit more muddy in here and they lose that intensity. Or well, the same result, right? With when we mix the black with the orange, it makes it feel muddy, washed out. This is because when we mix the black, we are degrading a lot of the color's potential out from the original color. And so this is why we mix a darker value, in this case like a red or a purple or a dark purple or these types of colors, to be able to maintain that energy that we want to actually possess. And thinking about it in terms of warm light or cool light would be one approach to make as well. This is one of the reasons why the Impressionists, if we look at the Impressionists, or so and why they're so important when we consider color, is that one of their goals was actually to eliminate black from their color palette and from their designs entirely. Now, whether this is the appropriate action we should be taking or not, it's certainly up to debate and discussion. However, one of the greatest takeaways here is that by using our blacks and our whites as sparingly as we can possible, we achieve a higher intensity and we're certainly more adventurous with our color choices. And this brings us to the last part of this entire process. Now, I had intended to show a video here and have everything sort of laid out for everybody and that type of thing to show you. But really the same thing applies here. And it's certainly worth noting, let me zoom in here a little bit, it's certainly worth noting with all this being said, the important point here is that when we look at nature, tints and shades they're actually very rare in truth, in that they are simply one way of us being able to describe the world around us. How often do you feel like you can't find, the right word expressing an idea? I certainly feel that way all the time. But it's the same thing applies here with color. Sometimes we're trying to find that right color to express the idea that we're after. The true key is to paint without worry or fear. While we all sort of certainly will we fail? Yes, obviously, of course, but never use that as ammunition. And tonight with this video is to ultimately to go after the journey and take the opportunity and grow. And with any new experience, by relearning, reevaluating on our old habits, and by testing the way is to learn by hands-on. Put it hands-on experience. And certainly we can look at these principles and kind of work through them, but really when it comes down to, we put our hands into it. And who knows where ultimately that will lead us. So there it is. There's my video. That's what this video was originally going to be about. Holy moly. So I'm glad I did all this stuff beforehand. Let's see here. I'm going to put this away. I can't believe it. Well, this is one of the reasons why I did this whole video. One is I wanted to change up a little bit of a format here. And the other is I wanted to, well, I can talk a little bit more about why I had stepped away and all that sort of stuff. I'll leave that for another day, but necessarily feel like talking about that. But I hadn't been doing YouTube videos or long form videos in a long time. I guess my personality is just to sit in front of the camera and to shoot it out. I have kind of an outline of like what I just followed and share all that stuff. And who knows anywhere else will this ultimately could lead. And along with that, what what possibilities could come out of it. And I I guess one of the things is just how, well, like I said, I'll leave that for another time. But really, the thing is that I wanted to get back in. I've been wanting to get back into this, and getting back into supporting the Patreon community that I have developed and all that sort of stuff and have going, and appreciate everybody helping out with that. It means the world. Couldn't be done without it. Any of this couldn't be done. And then certainly moving on to the bigger and better things. The Last Colony, for example, it's been on the shelf and it desperately needs dusted and cleaned off and ready to roll. So there is that too. And I just getting back to those basics. And so that's partly what a lot of this is actually all about. I wanted to.